Alright, so I've got the beginnings of a floor plan there, and now I want to put some annotation, and so by that I mean dimensions, but also some text, and I want that to be set up for the size I'm going to print. And so your thought process should be, when you are drawing physical elements, things that are going to be built, draw them one-to-one. So if you know about that and you've been thinking in one-to-one, in other words, the real size of your objects, and so just to make that really clear, this is a column. If I measure that, what's the size of a column? About 400 across quite often, and if I measure that, it is 400 mil. And it shouldn't matter if it's a 1 to 100 drawing, or a 1 to 50, which is be about the scale this plan will be, or a detail like this, which is set up for probably 1 to 5. If I measure something there, it's a brick that we're looking at there, and if I measure across, it's 110 mil. So it's the opposite to what you have when you draw manually, where you'll scale things in advance before you draw a line or something like that, and you use your scale rulers to do that. But when you draw your text, you don't need to think about the scale when you're drawing it by hand. You just get your letter template out, or you draw it by hand, and it is the size it is, 2 mil or 3 mil high, depending on how legible you need it to be. So it's, again, the opposite in AutoCAD. You need to think about the scale once you go to do things like your text or your dimensions, and a few other things as well. So I'll start with the text style. I think I did a video for you on this before, but I'll do it again just quickly because it's fairly easy. Quick way to get to it: on the Home tab, you have the annotation panel. Don't worry about going to the annotation tab. Just stay on the Home tab and then go to the drop down where it says annotation, and then you have the button next to the first drop down there, which is for text style, text style. And there you'll see we've got a few text styles already, but I'll make a new one. So new, and I'll call it labels. So this might be for my room labels. And here, annotative is your best friend when you're doing these annotative options. And the paper text height is the size then that you want it to print. It's simple. When you use annotative, you don't have to do any tricky multiplication or anything like that. Just make this size here the size you want it to be on your page when you print it out. So do you have an idea how big a label should be for a room or something like that? How big's normal text? 12 point, but in millimetres? Exactly. 3.5 is standard architectural text. Spot on. So that's good for general notes. Down to, what's your minimum text height? 1. Not far, a bit bigger. No, a bit too small. Yeah, no, 2 mil. 2 mil is about the minimum most people can read. So that's as low as you should go. And then things like titles and labels, you can go up to about 5 mil, or even bigger, depending on your sheet size. So I'll make it 5 for my label, but 3.5 is a good one to remember because that's pretty standard. And then the fonts. So you can choose any font you like. I won't talk to you too much about fonts. I'm sure you have an idea about those. And Arial, poor man's Helvetica, so it'll do. And set current to make it the current style. Yes, if you get a message, and you can close that, and you know that then if you look here, I'm drawing with that style labels that I've made. So that's not the only thing. Before I do some text, I then need to have an idea what scale this text is going to be used with before I've even made a sheet. And that's what this little button here does. Okay, so people think that by choosing a scale here, they're setting a scale to the whole project or to the whole drawing. It's not doing that at all. It's just setting a scale for your annotation. So text and these other things I'm going to be showing you. So maybe 1 to 50, you need to produce your drawings 1 to 50. So I'll choose that scale. And so then you have 2 different text options in AutoCAD. Probably these days you can use multi-line text for most of your text. So I'll show you that one first. With multi-line text, you click 2 points. Okay, so a starting point and then a second point to give the diagonally opposite corner of that paragraph. So here, I'll just click down and you can see it's going to make a rectangle, and I will call this the cafeteria or canteen. What are you calling it? Cafeteria? Cafeteria exhibition. Oh yeah, exhibition. Let's call it exhibition. That's better. Yeah. That way I don't have to check if cafeteria has 2 F's or not. It's just one, isn't it? Yeah. So there we are. So exhibition space, those better known. And so with this sort of text, you can adjust the width as you go, which is a nice thing. And you get the control bar up the top, which lets you change options on the fly as well. So that's another nice thing. So the size has been worked out for us. It's not 5 mil. We know that, because if it was 5 mil high in this space, we wouldn't be able to see it. It'd be tiny if those columns are 400 mil. So it's changed the size, but we don't need to think too much about that. AutoCAD's done that for us because we've set the right scale here. So if you know that you need to also produce this floor plan at 1 to 100, one way is to set the scale there to, again, 1 to 100, and then draw another lot of text the same way. I'm just going to show you this as an example, so you see really how it all works. Okay, so notice how it's double the size. And I'll leave that there. Now I'm going to set it back to 1 to 50 because I want to do most of this for 1 to 50. That's the scale you're focusing on. And then I'll just show you single line text so you can get an idea why you might use it. Okay, so with single line text, you don't give a paragraph or make a rectangle to start it, you just give a start point. Then it'll always ask you for a rotation angle. And that can give you an idea why single line text is useful, because you can easily do it at any angle. Okay, so I can just put... And that's really its main purpose these days. It does each line as a separate line of text. So if you do it over a couple of lines, press enter, and that's a separate object, that second line. But with multi-line text, it's all one object. It's more like a paragraph. So even though they're 2 separate lines, it's still the one text object. And that can be useful. So here you can go into properties. If you right click, you can choose properties from the menu there, and you can change most of the options that come up on the control bar initially. So here I can set the justification to center. Might be a better way of formatting that. And have a look at the other options that you have there. You can change most of the things that you need to. Okay, so that's text. It's really that easy. And I do have a layer for it, so I'll just put this all onto my text layer just to keep it organised. Ano, that's what I've called it. And now I'm going to draw some dimensions, so I may as well switch to that layer, and then I'll set up my dimension style. So when you make your own dimension styles, same way as text, I better show you again. Under the annotation panel, you have the little button next to the list of your dimension styles. So looking at these, well, I've made one previously, dim 50, which is okay, but the other two are pretty awful. So I'm going to click on the button next to that list, which takes you to dimension styles, And so here, unlike the text style, there's a few things to set up. I'll delete this one because you won't have it. So I've got, and this one as well, sorry, which is being used, so I can't delete it actually. So it's alright, I'll just make a new one. And so you may have just this one, ISO 25, or another similar one. So I'll go right through the setup process from the beginning. And so the first thing is to select the one that you want to begin with. You can't make a blank dimension style. You have to choose one that's already there, and then click the new button, and it'll create a new dimension style based on the one you've selected. And I'll call mine dim style, because I only need one. You don't need to make a lot of them using this method. And right away I'll tick annotative, because I'd like them always to be annotative. Continue. And so I'll check right through these. I normally do it right to left. Tolerances and alternate units, you don't really need to do anything there. But then primary units, you'll often need to change that. So they use a comma for the decimal separator. Often for people outside of America, they think we all use commas for decimals when we use periods mostly, but they don't do that. So make sure you change that unless you want the European style with a comma. Then precision, I usually would just set to 0. You don't need to show decimal places when you're working in millimetres. Rounding off, well, you don't really need to set an option there if you've got the precision at 0 anyway, but it's just a good option to know about. So you may at least set it to 1, so it rounds off to the nearest millimetre. But if you've got lots of dimensions that end up as things like 10,003 millimetres or something like that, it's not very good to have a dimension like that on your drawings. So you can round it off to the nearest 5 or 10. But you just need to be aware how much rounding off you're doing. Never change the measurement scale unless you really know what you're doing. Then the angular units, this is again optional, but I would usually set that to degrees, minutes and seconds rather than decimal degrees. Do you all know what how degrees, minutes and seconds work? So when you measure an angle, to give increments or divisions of an angle, you can divide it up into 60 minutes. So a minute is a 60th of a degree, and then second is a 60th of a minute. And it might sound crazy, but when you're working with angles, it's conventional actually to work in those increments of 60 rather than dividing it into 100 like you do with a decimal, or into 10 with a decimal. And that way it'll work with things like surveys and other drawings where you're always going to be given degrees, minutes and seconds and not decimals. But AutoCAD will do all the working out for you anyway. And so then the precision for these, I would have more than a degree. So here you don't need decimals of a second. So here I'm going to use 0 degrees, 0 minutes and 0 seconds. And then the next one, fit. You don't really need to change much here other than to check that annotative is turned on, but then you have options for the text placement, and sometimes, where are we? Sorry, you can change these so it goes inside. I always have to check. Oh no, sorry, that's actually okay the way it is. So, so again, if you need to move your text, you can change these options. They're really just slightly different formatting, but otherwise the annotative option is the main one there. And then text. This is really important. So you have the text style there. If you click on the little button next to that list, then it takes you to the text style dialog box, the one I was just using. And even though I've got one I could use, I'll make a new one just to show you how. So I'll call it dim style, and make it annotative, and then the paper text height I'll leave it 0. So that's the essential thing here. If you're using a text style with dimensions, don't set a height in the text style. Leave it at 0. The font is up to you. I tend to use pretty simple fonts for dimensions, so things like Roman, so Roman with an S is a very basic font. Arial's probably okay as well. And that's it. Close, it'll ask you if you want to save changes anyway, so I'll say yes. And then I can click on the little down arrow here and make sure that dim style is chosen. Okay, so the reason I didn't set a height, I left the height here at 0, is because you set a height in the dimension style. So here it'll be 2.5, and that's the height it'll print. And I'll prove that to you in a minute. So then the symbols and arrows, it's really up to you, but generally in Australia, architectural ticks or oblique are probably the most common symbol or thing to finish your dimensions with. And then the leader is again up to you, but I tend to use things like the right angle arrow. It's nice and clear that it's an arrow. And so that's all I need to do there. The arrow size, you should know about that. 2.5, I'll leave it at that. And the centre mark. Actually, the centre mark there is a bit small, so I'm going to make that bigger just so you can see it. So I'll make that. I'll make it 10. Oh no, it's not showing it to us. That's why. So I'll put it back to 3. It should be about that size. It's just that it's not showing here where it should be. So it's not really that important anyway, but it is good if you can see it. And so notice over here in the preview, I can still see everything clearly. If you don't see any of these elements, it means there's an issue with your scaling. And so when I go to the Lines tab now, this is all millimetres. And the reason I do it right to left is because you need to have options here, like architectural tick, to get the options on the first panel, on the Lines panel, to come up. So now I'm going to set the extend beyond ticks there to, I'll just set it to 2 so you can see what it's going to do. Okay, so if it wasn't clear, it's added these little extensions on the end of this line. And do you know what the line under your text is called? Okay, I'll give you a hint. You've got these 2 segments. You've got dimension lines and you've got extension lines. Exactly, it's dimension line. So the dimension line is the one the text sits next to. Exactly, that's right. The extension line, that's the one that measures to the object. That's exactly right. So if you set an extend beyond ticks value here, it's going to extend that dimension line, which is not a bad thing. And then here you've got the same option, extend beyond dim lines for the extension line. So 1.25, that's a bit stingy, so I'll make it 2 as well, and it's again extended those lines out to make it a bit more graphical. It's really up to you. You can make it less if you don't like it being that long, 1.5 or really whatever you like. There's no rule there. And so then probably the option you'll be working with the most here is, well, these 2 options, so you'll be working with the most. So offset from origin, if I set that to 2, you should see it come out from the object it's measuring. So it's setting out this extension line from that point there, which it's been first set to measure. Then you've got this option below, fixed length extension line. And that's one of the best new features in AutoCAD. But I'll leave it turned off, and then I'm going to come back and turn it on and show you why it's such a good thing. So that's it. That's my dimension style done. And if you set it up like that, you should be able to use that dimension style for all your dimensions. You don't have to make several of them. And you can even save that in your template, and you'll never have to do it again. And I know architects who've made them 20 years ago, and that's all they've ever done with dimension styles. So you just got to get it right once. Others never have gotten it right, and they fiddle around with them all the time. Yes, yeah, definitely, yep, that's right. Yep. And so, yeah, so if I click OK here, we're back to the Dim Style Manager, and yeah, choose the one you want, set current if it isn't current already, and then you can close, and now I'm ready to draw some dimensions. So I'll go to your main dimension tool in AutoCAD is linear, which you'll have in that same annotation panel. And so I'm just worried that my mic isn't working, so I'm going to make sure it's still. Here we go. Now that's working. So just making sure. And so with the panel there, you can click on the little arrow next to your dimension option there and choose the others as well. That linear will do most of them. Oh yeah, so you just got to check your scale. Okay, so here, just like the text, you need to check the annotation scale. And oh yes, it might be your size. I'll have a look at it in a bit. So I'm going to leave it on 1 to 50, and then linear dimensions are probably what you use 90% of the time, opposite to Revit if you know Revit. And so let's just dimension across this space. So here I'll go from the corner of the wall there to we'll say this is the face of that wall, so that's a good one. So I notice I chose things that were not in line. So those 2 points are diagonal line. But the good thing about linear dimensions is that it gives you either a vertical or a horizontal. So I probably can get a horizontal. There we are. So the second point I chose was 480 to the left of the first point. But it's not a problem, because again it's just going to give me the vertical or the Y dimension. And I'll just place that over to the side. I'll move my elevation away later. I'll do that now. Alright, so in the past, people would have draw the dimensions just like this, and then to make it neater, what they would often do is draw a line over to the side, and then, because you'd have a whole row of dimensions, and then they would get all the dimensions, and using the grips here, bring that back to the line to make it neat and have all the lines finishing at the same point. Right, and so if you can imagine having some more dimensions there, say from the column, and I'll place it over here, and then you'd probably dimension to the wall then, and again over to here, and then using the grips the same way, we can stretch it all back, and it's a bit tedious, but in the end you'll get the job done. Still easier than drawing it by hand. Okay, so that was the method, and I still see a lot of people doing it like this. Probably get rid of the line in the end. Makes it neat, but you don't need to do that anymore. So I'll just take this one back to the points it was on before. Right, so everything's really messy, the way it would be when you first draw this. But you have this great option in the dimension style. I'll just go back to that. So back to my dimension style, modify with the one I made selected. And here on the first tab, the lines tab, you have that option for fixed length extension lines. So this basically works the opposite way to offset from origin. Offset from origin is the reason I have a gap, and we'll just move this over so you can see. So there is a little gap from the object to my extension line, and I could make that bigger, but it's still always going to be measured from the point I've clicked. So it's going to be different for each of these lines because they're all different lengths. So that's not going to help us much. But if I go and put in that other option, fixed length extension line, that's measuring from the dimension line out. And so we can say, right, let's make this 10. It's a bit hard to see in the preview here, that's why I wanted to draw them. So I'll just click OK, close this one, and how much better is that? Right, so it's basically made this line from here to there 10 at 1 to 50. So it even works that out for you. Alright, so I'll maybe make it a bit longer because I've got a bit more of a gap. I could actually bring this one further as well. That maybe is simpler. And in fact, that's what I'll do. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so it's a great option. And one of the fairly new features in AutoCAD. And so now I can just draw some more dimensions, clicking any points that I want to measure between, knowing that no matter what I do, the extension lines are always going to be 10 mil long, which is a nice thing. And then just to follow on with what I was showing you about the text before, so I've got these two different sized bits of text, and you probably might still be thinking, what's that for? So I'll do the same thing with the dimensions. Okay, so here we've got this dimension that shows things like the columns, which you may show at 1 to 50. But then on a 1 to 100 drawing, that might be too much detail. So I'll change my scale here to 1 to 100, and I'll draw another dimension just for the overall size of this, which I know I already have, but I want it for 1 to 100 as well. Okay, so notice it's the same measurement, but the text and the symbols are a different size. So, final thing, I will put in this video the page setup. I'll just do the main steps though, so I don't go on too long. So I've got some layouts, and this is the way you'll have it. If you haven't done anything with layouts, click on either layout 1 or layout 2, and they'll look like this. They'll just have a viewport which shows everything drawn up to that point where you started looking at your layouts. So the first step is to get a handle on the page size. So this paper that we're looking at is our page, and so if you right click on either tab, I'm going to right click on the one that I have open, which is layout 1. Right, so then you can go to Page Setup Manager. Then click Modify. Then just follow these steps religiously until it's second nature. Set a printer first. Adobe PDF is a good one if you haven't got a real printer plugged into your computer. Or DWG to PDF is another good one if you don't have the Adobe PDF. And that saves you accidentally printing out on these plotters as well, which I know people do. So again, with the paper size, wait until you've checked the scale. So down here, you'll often see this option if you haven't got a file made with the right template, and you can easily change that to millimetres. Then the scale you can set to 1 to 1 afterwards. Make sure you do it in that order. So if it's on inches, set it to millimetres first, then set the scale. Always 1 to 1, by the way, if you're printing from a page. And then the paper size. So you should have metric paper sizes if you choose the PDF converter. And, well, have anyone worked out the page size you need for this plan at 1 to 50? No? That's okay, we can experiment. So I'll start with A1, which I think is about what you need. So I'm choosing the landscape version, 841 by 594, and I'll leave it on landscape over here as well. What to plot, make sure that's on layout. And then the other most important option is your plot style, which I'll leave on, well, I'll change to monochrome. So that's the page setup done, and it will just become second nature because you do that all the time in AutoCAD. Oh, you've got to choose the same printer as me. So I've chosen DWG to PDF. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So in fact, I've chosen the full bleed. I probably just should choose just standard ISO A1. And that's it. So you'll come back here and change things like the paper size quite often as well. Yep, definitely. Yep. Yep. So when I click OK, I'll see a big change now on that page, and that's normal. And so I can close this now, and you'll see then we've still got the same viewport down here, but it looks a bit strange now because I've set, by changing the page, I've set this up for metric. Before it was not set up properly for metric, it was set for inches. And so this is a viewport. If you haven't done much with layouts before, that's just a view of everything we've drawn. Because it's so small, I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm going to delete it. Just with it having it selected on the border, click on the erase button, and I've cleared the page, and I can make my own viewport. Now, it's useful to have a layer for your viewports, but if you've drawn a dimension, a good trick is to use the def points layer. Def points means definition points, and it's a non-printing layer that gets made whenever you make a dimension. So that's a quick one I can use, and saves me making a layer for now. And then the Viewport tool is on the Layout tab right at the end. Didn't used to be. In earlier versions of AutoCAD it's around here, but 2015 they've moved it to the end. And then the rectangular button makes a viewport for you. So I'm just going to click there on the top of that button, and I'm going to click 2 points to make a big rectangle, taking up most of the page. Not quite all, I want to leave a little bit of room. Alright, so you can see already it's only showing some of that text and some of the dimensions, or one of the dimensions. But I want to get a bit more control over what's happening with that viewport. So again, no, it's going to be a bit for you to take in if you haven't done this before, but just try following through the steps that I'm doing. And so the next thing is to set model space by choosing the button that says paper. You might have been shown that you can double click as well. That's another way. So double clicking on the viewport takes you into it, and you can see there it now says model. Double click on the page and that takes you back to paper, and you can see it says paper there. So model and paper are your two modes, or model space and paper space. So by going to model, I'm working with the same things I was earlier on the model tab where I've been drawing up until now. So if you watch what happens when I zoom, you can see it's zooming only inside the viewport, not the whole page. If I switch by clicking on that button there, model, so that I'm back on the page, now when I zoom, the whole page changes size. So you've got those two virtual spaces. And so I want to be able to see the whole page so I can gauge how big things are. And then clicking paper, now I'm in model space. And so the final thing I want to show you for now is to set the scale there. I can choose either of those scales I've set previously. So this hopefully will tie it all together a bit. 1 to 50 is the scale I used to draw most of those dimensions, and the lot of text I did at the beginning as well. So this text here, these ones up there. So if you're wondering about that annotative option, it does more than set work out the size for you. It also turns it on and off in the viewport, depending on the scale. So because I've chosen 1 to 50 for the scale of this viewport, it's turned that text and this lot of dimensions that I drew back in the model tab when I had 1 to 50 chosen here. So watch what happens if I change that scale in the viewport now to 1 to 100. What do you know? It brings in the other text that I did and shows a different dimension. So it can seem a bit confusing at first, why are you doing 2 lots of text that say the same thing, and why are you doing 2 lots of dimensions that might give the same measurements. But it does make sense after a while, because at different scales you will have different notes and different dimensions. So it's actually a pretty logical system. And so this way you can get a really good idea exactly what's going to fit on the different page sizes when you do the different scales. So 1 to 100, you're going to fit this plan really easily, and a lot of other drawings as well. But at 1 to 50, you won't fit much more than the floor plan, especially once you put all the dimensions around it. And so I might leave it at that for now. I'll just maybe go back to paper and show you that you can adjust those viewports. They're just like a cropping region, so if you know about cropping, you can bring that in to crop out things that you don't want to see. The grid looks awful, so to turn that off you'd have to go back to model and click on the grid button down the bottom. Just makes it easier to look at. The grid won't print. And so as a very final thing, I'll make a viewport at a different scale. So again, this is on the layout tab, and I'll use the rectangular button again to make a viewport just to the right. Clicking on the paper button down the bottom, I've got a little detail here which is set up for 1 to 10, and so then you can see, having chosen the scale that I've set this up for, my text and dimensions turn on automatically, and that's all the annotative option. So back to paper space, and again that viewport can be adjusted. I'll turn ortho off to stop it moving in right angles. And then look at the print preview, and that will redo it. So I've just, sorry if you missed that, gone to the main menu and chosen print, and then I'll click the preview button. That's how it would print out. So zooming in, you can see the line weights and other things like that, but the most important thing is that text and dimensions are legible. And I won't print it out, so I'll cancel that. But anyhow, now you've got the steps recorded, so I'll finish the recording.